Okay, let's see. We have started the session, so let's see as people roll in. Welcome. If you're not familiar with Demio, you can use the chat to say hello, ask questions. So please feel free to utilize that as we roll through the webinar. Going to give it a few more minutes before we actually start the slide deck. Going to give it one more minute before we start, but thank you for joining. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to our webinar today, Bridging the Gap, How Text-to-Speech Can Help Incarcerated Learners. I'm Kathy Wood. I'm the Education Partner Manager here at ReadSpeaker, and alongside me today is my colleague, Ginger Dewey, who is our Educational Development Manager. If you utilize ReadSpeaker, you are familiar with Ginger because she has helped you implement your solution. Clarence is also on the call today. He's not on the stage right now, but he will be here to answer any questions you have about pricing. But today, I really want to highlight the fact that we are featuring an interview that we had with Lauren Salina from Tennessee Board of Regents, and she had some amazing information to share from the aspect of utilizing text-to-speech in the correctional facilities area. So I'm excited to share those snippets of the interview with you today. But let's go ahead and get started. If you're not familiar with ReadSpeaker, I want to tell you just a little bit about who we are and what we do. And at the very top of the screen is our flagship image of our product, web reader. And we always like to talk about how easy our product is to use and implement. And it is literally as easy as clicking the listen button. So we are a text-to-speech company, and we do like to talk about our voices and how we actually have our own linguistics team who actually creates the voices from voice talent. And why is that important to mention? Because you want to be able to use voices that are very human-like and relatable. We have over 20 years of experience in the market. We're used by over 1,500 institutions globally. And we always like to talk about that UDL methodology of helping everyone, not just a few. So while I was researching for this webinar, there were some very alarming statistics that I found when we talk about incarcerated learners and the learning disabilities that they face. And just, I'm not going to read the screen, but just looking at some of these statistics, we talk about how, you know, that seventh grade is kind of that point to where, you know, that the line was drawn in terms of how they were below in reading, writing, and even mathematics at that area. And nearly a quarter of all prisoners participating in special education classes. That's a high number. Some other statistics I found was over 2.2 million people that were locked up in the American prisons were locked up in American prisons or jails. And when I was talking to Lauren about some of these statistics, you know, it's a very forgotten population when we think about education. And when we talk about recidivism, the likelihood to repeat, you know, Rand in these studies showed that education actually helps break that cycle. And again, we'll hear more about that from Lauren. So when we talk about bridging the gap, we think about that UDL methodology. And one of my favorite images I like to use to reference UDL is the graphic on your right. And it shows, for a fair selection, everyone has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that fish can accomplish that task. So when we think about bridging the gap, and we think about that in relation to our learners, and we think about that in relation to education, we want to be providing tools that help level that playing field for all of our learners, no matter how they learn. And so this is kind of talking about how to bridge that gap. So I want to go ahead and jump right into our interview with Lauren. And in the first video that we have, Lauren's going to introduce herself, and we're going to address those low literacy rates and that recidivism that we talked about.
Applied technology, so technical college programs, and one associate program in all of the state-run Tennessee departments.
Lauren, thank you for joining us today. If you don't mind, would you introduce yourself, your title, and what you do?
All right, so my name is Lauren Salina, and my title is Coordinator of Special Programs for Correctional Education for the Tennessee Board of Regents, and I have the great honor of representing TBR in the Governor's Correctional Education Initiative. So that is actually a statewide system of higher education in prison. And to date, we have established anywhere from 1 to 5 what we call Tennessee College of Applied Technology, so technical college programs, and 1 associate program in all of the state-run Tennessee Department of Correction facilities here in Tennessee.
That's a mouthful.
It is, yes. Not quite an elevator pitch, but kind of.
So I was doing some research for this webinar, and I was just looking at the statistics of education, or the struggles of our incarcerated population, in terms of, even when we talk about GEDs, we talk about even the learning struggles, learning disabilities, and how skewed those numbers are when we think about our incarcerated population. So talking about that and thinking about that, addressing that low literacy and even computer literacy, and what your role plays in that. How do you see helping those incarcerated learners with those low statistics of learning disabilities?
What's interesting is that we know that incarcerated learners trail their free world peers by every metric of academic success by around 10 points. So reading level, high school completion rate, things of that nature. But when you get learners who are incarcerated into college courses, they tend to excel their free world peers. We see huge GPAs. The faculty tend to love working with students. They're hungry for that education. And it's been said that these are students getting a second chance at education, but it's really a misnomer, because far too often it's their first chance at education. So we're really facing a large number of educational barriers in trying to address these students. On top of that, you have a large number of students who may have had some learning barriers that have been learning or disabilities such as ADD, like myself, that were just undiagnosed, right? And that can contribute to why they didn't achieve in a traditional educational setting. And in the incarcerated setting, it's incredibly difficult to get those diagnostic tests to even identify and address those barriers to provide disability services like we would in a free world college setting, even if we were able, which in our system, we're very lucky that we are able, but just that simple act of identifying and getting the resources. What we really are excited about ReadSpeaker being able to do is that it's just across the board, right? So every single learner is going to have access to the tools that they need to be successful, whether that's your student with a true barrier or your student that's just gifted and wants to speed that reading up to maximize their very limited time in the lab, because that's a challenge we face as well, is getting enough time in the computer lab or the classroom for our students to really study. So even the little things that ReadSpeaker brings to the table, like the ability to color code, highlight, and then print your notes from our learning management system, and then take that back to your cell, you can't discount that as an invaluable tool for any level of learner, regardless of their barrier, whether it's been diagnosed and whether we can document and address it across the board. Every single one of our students is going to have access to this tool for success.
So when we talk about education for our incarcerated learners, I also read how when we educate and provide these tools for our incarcerated learners, throw me out a statistic or throw me out the knowledge of how many, once they're released, this helps with not repeating.
So recidivism is the big fact, right? So a lot of people look at recidivism as the metric of what we're supposed to be going for, because we know that 48% nationwide of incarcerated persons will return to prison within 3 years. And really that's why Tennessee got into this, is we wanted to do better. And it's not that, you know, people just want to return to a life of crime. The American Bar Association has identified 48,000 collateral consequences of incarceration. So it's a misnomer that you serve your time and you're done and you get out and you go on to your free world existence. There's all these barriers facing you. But what we do know is that correctional education, or education received immediately upon release, will attack that recidivism number. So if you've gotten a technical or associate degree, it takes that recidivism down by 13 percentage points. A bachelor's degree, 35 percentage points. Wow. And to date, no one who's ever gotten a master's degree, either inside or immediately upon release, has ever returned to prison.
Those are eye-opening numbers, I just have to say, because I mean, so much so when we think about providing tools for learners, it is a forgotten population to the majority when we think about these incarcerated learners, and to note those statistics and that these tools can actually help people, you know, that rate. I mean, even 13% is a huge number when you think about that. Unmute myself for a second. So very interesting information from Lauren in just that video when we talk about those statistics. In our next video, Lauren and I discussed English as a second language and our language barriers for our incarcerated learners. We are very familiar when we talk about in the regular education setting, English as a second language, especially when we talk about, you know, our K-12 learners, even up to higher ed, that English was not the first language taught in the home. And again, thinking about our incarcerated learners, again, those tools can help everyone, and we need to stop forgetting that these tools can help both inside and outside of a correctional facility. So let's watch this next video on Lauren talking about those those language barriers. Let's also talk about tools for those even with language barriers. And I see you like, yep.
Yeah, that's a huge forgotten population. We don't think about how many people are incarcerated that are, so nationwide, just about every state will require that if you are incarcerated, that you have to get your high set or your high school equivalency, right? But imagine trying to get your high school equivalency and you just don't speak the language. It's not a problem of you can't pass the subject. It's a problem of you can't read the test, right? So one thing we found was that we actually just had a principal and a associate warden of treatment, which education is considered treatment in most states, but here in Tennessee, that both were Spanish speakers. And so they noticed that they had this large population of Hispanic learners in their classes. They kept performing poorly on the high set. And so they decided to offer it to them in Spanish, and they literally sat there and read the exam to them in Spanish, and they did great. And so they were like, okay, we got to figure out how we can offer this to them in the language that they speak. And so now we've begun offering the high set in different languages. And so that's something that we were really excited about ReadSpeaker, because it translates into all of these different languages. So our learners that come to us with any different language barrier, they can click a button and just have it in their native language, because that's another barrier, right? And it's such a simple fix that we take for granted, that, you know, and it takes a lift off of the faculty member to, you know, we want our students to, you know, in America, their English is our primary language, and so we want everybody to acclimate to the culture, right? But we want them to be successful too, and that's what student success is it's the great equalizer of getting everybody to class, getting those barriers eliminated so people can really just focus on the content and be successful. And that's what ReadSpeaker brings to the table for us, is to make it that equalizer across the board so that everybody has what they need to be successful and just worry about the content.
Again, great information from Lauren. And I do want to pause here to see if we had any questions thus far before I share our next bit from Lauren. So I'll take just a second and pause to see if we have any questions. Again, please feel free to utilize the chat if you have any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any questions thus far. So our next video, Lauren really talks about how her team at Tennessee Board of Regents works together really to start the process and provide these tools for their learners. So let's watch that next video. I mean, what advice would you give those who are just trying to figure this out?
Technology is always going to be the hardest piece, right? And as academics, we come to the table just squarely as academics, right? And so we are lucky in the state of Tennessee that we've been partnered as we partner multiple state agencies, and we each our secret sauce, as we like to say, is that we each just kind of man our piece of the puzzle, right? So we're manning the academics, and we're trying to replicate what we do really well, which is free world education inside. And if we partner well with our Department of Correction, who does safety and security really well, then everybody staying in their lane, we can create something that has the technology we need to give our academic, high quality academics in a safe and secure setting with technology. And it's not easy. I will just admit that technology will always be our biggest struggle. And that's why, you know, products like ReadSpeaker that integrate seamlessly with our learning management system, D2L, and just flip like a switch. You know, that's what's so appealing to us about something like this, is that, you know, our Department of Correction IT people just, we've never had such an easy acceptance on something. They were like, yes, yes, and more yes, because, you know, D2L as a learning management system gives us a lot of options on the back end, a lot of control where we can just, you know, click buttons and keep it locked down. Department of Corrections, we use whitelisting, so we literally let everything in. It's tedious, it's difficult, but we've been told that our system is just as secure as some of the military systems. And that helps everybody stay in something that they're comfortable with and still give the students the same high quality education that their peers would receive in the free world, and then also prepares them for when they're released. We have students that are released mid-semester all the time, and they're easily able to shift from that class they were taking inside to one of our outside classes, and then just keep on keeping on finishing their degree, because you've got to have that technology piece. You can't have people coming out from the inside where they weren't used to using a cell phone, or which is essentially just a mini computer in your hands, and you haven't had access to that for 20 years. So we've got to skill people up for the future, but there is a way to do that safely, securely. And what we found is just everybody kind of staying in their lane, but working together is the way to do that. And, you know, staying on top of the ed tech and finding great products like ReadSpeaker really helps us do that.
I wish I could tell you how wild I was from my conversations with Lauren. The amount of knowledge she provides in this arena is just amazing. Our next and final video with Lauren's interview kind of really talks about, you know, why ReadSpeaker, and just a little bit more advice for those that are on this journey for correctional facilities. Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, so ReadSpeaker is on its face, it's such a simple tool, but it does so much more than you would think. We had the running joke that in the background that it slices and dices and does everything, because it really does address literally every learning barrier that we could think of that our students might face. And because we can just put it on our learning management system for every student to make use of, it does address, you know, like my son is dyslexic, but he didn't find out until he was, you know, we thought quite a few times throughout his educational career, but we didn't know for sure until high school, right? And then by then he was like, well, there's nothing you can do for dyslexia, so, you know, why bother? But a tool like ReadSpeaker allows you to use the learning window, or just turn on the reading in the background as you're focusing on something, and give you that extra oomph to be successful. And so, you know, so often in the correctional education space, one, because after the 94 crime bill, there was just nothing. So it is somewhat of a new emerging field. And then two, because it is in a carceral setting where we're just struggling to get, you know, any access in a lot of cases, your students with disabilities are really the ones that are going to suffer, because there's just not enough bandwidth to address it. So something like ReadSpeaker is just such an incredible tool that is so easy to implement that I wish our IT director really for Department of Corrections said he wishes that all of the colleges could get it. And that's kind of our next thing, is how do we make this something to where, you know, all of the colleges in our system can have it, so that literally every student within Department of Corrections that is taking a class will be able to use this tool and be able to benefit themselves regardless of what they may be facing, whether they've got a disability, whether they don't have a disability, where they have a need to just be able to learn more efficiently, more effectively, address a need they maybe didn't know they have. And I think that any system that's looking to do better for their students could use this tool.
Again, I'm just, you know, this whole topic, I just don't think has gotten enough attention.
Mm-mm.
And so, you know, I really, truly appreciate you joining me today, because I believe that your experience in this, you guys kind of driving this, is going to help others, and therefore it will help all these learners. And so again, I appreciate it. And again, thank you.
Thank you. We're really, really excited.
So Lauren touched on a very common issue, whether inside or outside of an incarcerated setting. So undisclosed learners. We have our elementary population, we've got our high school population, we've got our college population. There are students that go through the system never identified as needing accommodations. When we look back at those statistics we saw on one of the earlier slides of a lot of these incarcerated learners never get above like a 7th grade level in their mathematics or reading or writing. And the 24% that have had special education while they were in school. That UDL methodology that ReadSpeaker is a champion of having tools that work for everyone, helps those students that need those extra accommodations. Ginger, I know you've had some internet issues while we've been showing some of the videos, but I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that before we showed ReadSpeaker in action, talking about those language barriers, talking about UDL, and just talking about the tools that can help benefit all of these students. I didn't know if you wanted just to add anything to that.
Yes, I would. First off, when you think about the UDL model, presenting things so the student can learn the way they learn, not the way you learn or Kathy learns or I learn, but the way they learn. And having an ADD daughter and an ADHD son, I learned early on that learning is very different for both of them. So you've got to let the learner take control. And that's what WebReader and DocReader do. They let the learner set up their settings the way that they want it. So it's appearing in the way they need it. There are tools there like a page mask to help with distraction, to lower it. We have tools for students who don't necessarily have a disability, but are hitting their head on that brick wall in that one course. It's driving them up the wall, but they can't get it. So in things like that, you can use the enlarged text and slow the speed down by 5%. And then you have time to digest all those minute facts and get it a little bit better than you were before. There are other tools, such as picking the voice that resonates with you. I wear hearing aids, and without my hearing aids, lucky me, I don't really hear the tone of my husband's voice. So if the voice on that I was using was his tone, I would have a trouble understanding it and hearing it. But with my hearing aids, yes, I can hear him. He accuses me of turning them off occasionally, but so be it. But those voices are very important for the student to pick what resonates with them. For whatever reason, they may need a British accent to really engage. Kathy, I think you said your son used a British accent when we were locked down in COVID so that he didn't go I'll say screen blind, but it's more than that, losing all that focus. There are so many tools that we offer. Note taking, distractions, how to deal with those, how to deal with slow internet, how to deal with internet that goes off like mine is doing here.
Yeah. And Ginger, I do want to, go back around to the fact that, when we think about the traditional educational setting, we think about our parapros, or we think about our student teacher helpers. We don't have that in an incarcerated setting. It's very much a hands-off type of learning environment, to where the learner doesn't have all of these extra things to help them in their learning journey. So what better way than to provide tools that empower them to learn on their own?
Well, that's another thing. They don't have the internet when they're in their cell. So they can download their MP3s of it and listen there. They can print off their notes or their lesson and listen to it while they're reading along. It's not the highlighted reading along, but it's letting them read it while they're hearing it. They're still using that bimodal presentation. And we know with bimodal presentations that your increase of retaining material jumps from somewhere in the 30s to somewhere in the 60 percentage points, depending on who you read from. But just that, the fact that they can still go to their cell and work, that's important. Kathy?
So I want to, Ginger had prepared a really quick video for use for D2L users, and Lauren at Tennessee Board of Regents, D2L is their LMS of choice. And so this quick video highlights just some of those different tools that Ginger mentioned, you know, when we talk about page mask or just the individual settings. And always remember, when we talk about ReadSpeaker's tools, they are by student, by device. And so we're not forcing a blanket solution on our learners. Again, it's about that learner preference and how they learn best. So they get to actually have their own particular settings for their device. So let's watch this quick video.
Want to get more out of your learning? If so, then you want to use the ReadSpeaker suite of learning tools. You can listen to lessons, documents, quizzes, assignments, and more. Let's listen to part of this lesson.
Knowing where to find learner support is essential to your success.
Reduce screen burnout and increase focus by using tools like a page mask, enlarged text, text mode, changing voices, a reading ruler, highlighting, and more. How do I know which tool to use? If you have a listen button, then use it. If not, look for the Open with Doc Reader button from the title drop-down menu. It's easy to see how this will help you become more engaged with your course.
I was on mute. I apologize. I'm going to put back our PowerPoint slide up here, and I'm going to go to the last slide, and I'm going to open up to questions, but please take note on the screen of our email addresses, our website, and always follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for information about new product releases, new voices we're coming out with, events we'll be at. But we also want to always emphasize that we offer a free sandbox environment. So if it's something that you're interested in, we offer this free demo account where you get to test our tools with your content. Basically, Ginger and I always like to call it kicking the tires. That is the best way you're going to figure out how these tools work for you in the content that you've created and that you're providing your own learners. You can see for yourself and actually hear for yourself the voices. And again, when we talk about our voices, it's always a continual improvement process. But the great thing about us owning the entire process of the voice, from the creation of it to the deployment of it, is that we can customize it. So if there are particular words that are not being, Ginger, I think you used the example of a institution that's on the Canadian border, and their president, I think, had a French last name, and we customized it to where anytime on that website that it was saying the last name of this president, it was saying it in the correct French translation. And when we think about acronyms, think about Lauren and Tennessee Board of Regents, TBR. If you wanted it to always say out Tennessee Board of Regents, we can customize it that way. So it's always important to know that we are attuned to those needs, and that we can do it very quickly for our clients. So again, I want to open it up to see if anybody had any questions. This has been recorded. You will receive a link to the recording afterwards. And again, you can always reach out to us. If you have a team that you need to set up a personal demo for, that needs to see a little bit more deeper dive in whatever LMS you're using, we can do that. And if you have any questions about pricing, clearance, or even one of our Ginger or I can get you in touch with your particular rep for your region. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll be here for a few more minutes. But again, thank you for attending, and we hope that this has been informative. I know that I learned a lot from Lauren. And again, I think it's very much a population that can benefit from these types of tools, especially when we think about that recidivism rate and how education plays such an important part in that.
I'd also like to say thank you and say that with our sandbox and with our production environments, when you move, purchase, and go on forward, we provide your learning support for free. So whatever you need virtually, we're here to provide it. And we want it to be good for you, because we know that if you purchase something and it doesn't fit your bill, then you're not going to stay with it. So we want to make certain that we fit the way you need us to fit, and that we're providing what you need. Thank you for attending today.
Thank you, everyone. And again, you'll receive a link to the recording, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.